Welcome to Check In with Jason Lauritsen, a podcast where we explore how to create human, connected workplaces that employees love and that fuel organizational success. Each week, I invite someone who is leading the way in this work to join me for a conversation to help educate and inspire us. Now, my guest today is Andrea Herron. She is a human resources executive leader, coach, author, and host of the award-winning podcast, The HR Scoop, which I have had the honor of being a guest on recently. Andrea is the head of people at WebMD and the co-author of the book, There's an Elephant in Your Office. Andrea, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be the one getting asked the questions this time.
We're switching seats, as it were. Well, you are truly a leader, as I mentioned, on all fronts related to making work more human and making work a more connected experience for people. You're doing that in a lot of different ways. So I'd love to start by just, inviting you to talk a little bit more about the work you do.
Sure. I do a lot of things, and I think that's what keeps it fresh and exciting for me. But, I've been doing HR for almost 20 years, which when I say out loud doesn't feel possible, yet here we are. I've had the pleasure of working in a variety of environments, which I think has been very fulfilling from, starting in plastic manufacturing, going to energy conservation for some good karma, leading up HR for the Oregon Humane Society, which I could just never get tired of puppies and kittens. And, now working for a big healthcare tech company and leading HR for WebMD. So that's, the day job. And I do love all of that. And hopefully, we're going to get into some of the details of that. But I do also care a lot about mental health. I mean, we all should. But you mentioned the book, and I did write that together with my sister who had, a mental health crisis at work. And we decided to write that book afterward together to shine some light and give some real tactical information on how workplaces can do better. And that was before 2020. So we even did a second edition in 2022 to talk about remote work and how that factors into mental health. So I love speaking about that and leadership and culture and leading the way because we're going to continue to move forward. So why not make it, as amazing as we can?
I want to talk about all of it. I want to get into all of the work. That's you and I think, are interested in many of the same things, hence why we're back here again, I think, having another conversation.
Yes.
But I am curious, as someone who has spent a couple of decades in this work, sadly for me, it's even longer than that. How did you find your way into this work? I know I'm always curious about how people find their way to HR because it rarely seems that people find our way here on purpose. It sort of ends up being we're interested in this and find out we can do that in HR. So I'm curious what it was for you. How did you find your way into it?
Yeah, you're right. I love hearing how people landed in HR. And I am one of those rare cases that I knew what I wanted to do right away. I did an HR internship in grad school and never looked back because honestly, my grad school and undergrad degrees were in psychology. And so I knew at the time I was too sensitive of a soul to do one-on-one counseling with people's personal lives. I knew that wouldn't be a healthy boundary for me. And so I thought, well, how can I still help the most people and do this kind of work? And so HR came to mind, and I love it. I have always done it, and I'm just one of those rare birds.
I love that. I think maybe you had the ability to kind of discern what it is you wanted to do earlier than most of us, I guess, because then I relate to the comment about the counseling. For me, it was pre-med. I went to school as pre-med. It wasn't psychology, but I realized that I just didn't have the empathic capacity kind of to take on all day long with people who are sort of on their worst day or are hurting, couldn't do it. So it just took me, the better part of a decade to figure out where I should be doing things. So you were just a lot smarter and faster to get there, I think.
Well,
let's call it that. Let's go with that. Just take the win for today. So,
right.
So what has kept you in it? What do you love about this work the most?
So, what I love about it is the variety. And I love that after all these years, I can still be surprised.
Mm.
And people just, they're out there peopling all over the place. And my ability to grow my compassion and empathy and understanding never ceases. And when I can help someone else in their journey and make their workday, work life a little better, or make a leader a little bit of a better leader, I just find it incredibly rewarding, and it makes up for all of the, back end thankless tasks that it makes up the majority of the job. Actually really fulfilling and worth it when you see that positive change in even just one person, or you get one genuine compliment that you changed their day, their perspective, how they handled a situation, and that just warms my heart.
Mm. Truly, I think if you're in it to impact people, and especially I can see with the psychology background, there's not many roles where you can have the mass impact on people in a positive way that you can in HR. And it's inspiring when leaders do care about people in that way in HR, because I think that's what certainly we need a lot more of.
Agreed.
So I have to now ask a little bit about the book, because I will be honest, when I started researching, I didn't know, I knew that you did some speaking and I knew that you had done a whole bunch of different things. I find the book and then I dive in on the book and I find sort of how you got to the book, and you wrote it with your sister and it has such an interesting title. There's an elephant in your office. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the book. It sounds like it's about mental health and workplace, but can you tell us a little bit about what's in it and kind of what give us the Cliff Notes version. That's probably an aged reference now. I don't know if people do Cliff Notes anymore, but a
Don't say
short version, a summary version.
I know what you mean. Yes, where would I be without Cliff Notes?
That's right.
So the book itself came from that mental health crisis that my sister had. And, she called me, her sister in HR, and said, help me out. I'm going to lose my job. I'm trying to work with my therapist and my medication for my anxiety and depression. And I was saying, what anxiety? What are you talking about? And I didn't even know that my own sister was struggling with those mental health challenges because of the stigma and shame that have gone with mental health until very recent times. And so, everything out there was legal, it was case law, it was benefit language. It was completely unhelpful to your average HR practitioner or frontline manager. And so we really wanted to close that gap to have examples, real life stories, real life tactical tools to help people going to the job every day to do the job they want to do while living with a mental health condition. So the elephants, I found in my career in HR that when you have more challenging topics, if you can come up with a slightly cheeky way to talk about it, it's just a little bit more digestible. So elephants, right? So we have three herds of
Mm.
elephants that divide out the most common ways that mental health shows up at work. So you've got kind of your category of people who are in a situational moment. So maybe someone's going through a divorce, a natural disaster, a pandemic, a breakup, a death, kind of those more in the moment things, and how you can show up and support them. The middle group is people that just live with the anxiety, the depression, the PTSD, the things you think of most, and how managers can support them without crossing any lines. And then the third and final herd is those who have kind of a really disruptive episode, kind of a meltdown, a blow up, and what to do in those situations as well.
Hmm. I mean, the elephant, the double meaning of the elephant too, to your point, as you were talking about that, I'm thinking and referencing that this was written pre-2020, I guess just a moment to acknowledge how far we truly have come.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that the work is anywhere near being over. We still have a lot of work to do, but the destigmatization in terms of even being able to talk about it, I can't imagine. It was a lot different
Yeah.
pre-pandemic. I mean, so this was, it's still what you're describing, I think still is the work that we need to do in terms of equipping managers, HR leaders with how to actually step into it. It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to step into how to support people that are actually in the midst of working their way through this stuff. So I'm curious, just as someone fascinated with those who write books to drive change, like what has been your, most optimistic kind of takeaway or impact or interaction as a result of the book?
Oh, so many. I do think we were a bit ahead of the curve in, 2019 publishing. And thankfully, the broader culture has caught up. And I think that we are now ready to have those conversations and actually use the tools. Whereas before, I don't think there was as much of a willingness. I mean, obviously saw the need, but now I think the willingness has come around. I mean, even if you just think of the number of people who reference their therapist, just take that one tiny example. That is not stigmatized anymore. It used to be if you're going to a therapist, something is wrong. And now it's just part of a healthy, mental health toolkit that we all need someone to talk to. Like, it seems more obvious. But to your question, I think the most rewarding thing, which probably won't be surprising, is that every time I talk about it in my own organization or I'm doing a speakership somewhere, people want to share their stories with me because I am a safe person, because I have opened the door to have those conversations. And again, it's so rewarding for people to feel safe and comfortable and like they can share. And it's even better when it's a leader in an organization because that effect is tenfold. Having a leader openly talk about an example, share a story, even if it's not their personal mental health, but just a story, is the number one indicator that a culture will feel psychologically safe and people will feel more comfortable that they can seek the mental health conversation, even not even the support and tools, but just being free to talk about it. So that is rewarding when you can make that shift because it's going to have an impact.
Mm. Well, and the reality is you can't apply tools to help people if they don't feel like they can talk about it or show it at work. They're going to hide it, can't support them. And if you can't support them, everybody loses. So that's awesome.
Yeah, we talk about cubicle camouflage and invisible elephants because nobody wants to feel othered or feel like people are looking at them negatively at work. I mean, people want to show up and do their job. And so those who are managing mental health used to feel like I've got to blend in and I've got to hide all these things and work triple hard just to maintain normal, whatever that means. And so they're not able to give that energy to the work product. So the more we can just make it normalized, actually productivity and engagement goes way up.
Amen.
Yeah.
One more quick fun question to get to know you before we dive in on some of your work at WebMD. What do you do for fun when you aren't doing the work of HR executiving? Is that a thing, doing the HR executive work?
Sure. I try to have a lot of fun. I think fun is really, really important, especially as adults. We don't tend to have enough fun. So I do spend a lot of time at various fields watching my two boys play all the sports. But just for myself, I love to go dancing. And I've recently started getting into roller derby.
No kidding. Well, that sounds like that would be a conversation for probably a whole nother podcast. That's a fascinating thing to observe. I can't imagine what it's like to be on it. I personally can't even stand up on roller skates for very long, so that would not work for me, but that is amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm not great, but it's okay to be new and a beginner at something as an adult. It's humbling in like a very good way.
I bet. Well, and I have heard that the culture around, and I don't know if I watched, I've heard this from people, and then I watched, I think, a documentary at some point, that the culture of roller derby is super like supportive and empowering.
Very supportive, very inclusive, very empowering. Yes.
Awesome. Well, I didn't expect to be talking roller derby today, so that's a win. So thank you for sharing that. Yes, you are. So let's talk. I had asked you in our pre-conversation what kind of work you were doing internally that you were really excited about or proud of in terms of the impact. And the thing that you mentioned is that you feel like you're doing some really good work or have made some progress around really building and creating and fostering connection in your sort of hybrid and distributed workforce. You've got people kind of all over the place, like most people do. And so I'd love to hear more about that to dive in. So I'd love to ask you to, I guess, start. Where did that start for you? When did you start realizing that this was something that warranted focus and sort of emphasis?
Yeah, so it was a bit of a double whammy, to be honest. Pre 2020, we had a very in office culture, 5 days a week. We didn't really have remote staff. We were office based. And in March 2020, we acquired a company, really fun timing. And that company was fully remote. And so immediately we had to integrate a fully remote culture with an in office culture. Oh, and by the way, everything shut down, everyone went home, and that was the very beginning of the pandemic. And so I'm actually very grateful. It was a very intense time as far as acquisition and merging cultures goes, don't get me wrong, but having the partnership with that company who was remote really allowed us to kind of steal the best ideas, to take what was already working, and actually supported that integration because we weren't saying, oh, we know better, you're part of our company now. We were saying, actually, you know better. Can you help us be a better company now? And so that was really important and just obvious because of the moment of history we were in, is that everyone was remote and we had all these new colleagues that we had to get to know, and we couldn't rely on an office to do it.
So where did that start then? So how did you, I'm curious kind of where you started noticing that there were opportunities, or maybe that you needed to intervene. Like, I'm curious where that, what was the early part of that work like?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. Because it was combined with an acquisition and COVID, we'd always had a really great kind of culture committee that did in-office things. So immediately when everyone went home, that team was spinning on, well, what can we do now to keep that culture, to keep some connectedness? Everyone's lonely. We had a lot of employees that live by themselves. And so it just became obvious that we had to pivot quickly to doing something remote. And then, I think the other part was that we had these new colleagues. And so you have departments and people that now are in the same team that if you're not on camera or you don't share any overlap and you don't get to know each other, you start to see conflicts. You see us versus them. You see like, well, we did it this way. Well, we did it this way. And you don't have a shared foundation or any shared understanding or connection or relationship to build from. That creates conflict. And then not only is there inner team conflict, but now there's cross team conflict because you've got 1,000 permutations of what is normal, what are the expected ways we operate, kind of those agreements we make of how do we talk to each other? Do we chat? Do we meet? Do we email? Even the baseline kind of went away with COVID and the acquisition.
So how did I guess the question I'm trying to get to is with the committees, as you had this culture committee. So you pivoted the culture committee, it sounds like, they stayed intact, started operating differently. What did that start to look like as they started to, what did they discover? Because one of the narratives that I hear a lot, people talk about that, you hear a lot right now, people are forcing people back into the office. A lot of organizations pulling people back into the office under the auspices of culture. They're like, it almost as if you can't build culture or maintain culture if you're not in the office. So I'm curious what you learned about that, or what that committee learned about culture as they were trying to do that work now with a distributed workforce.
Yeah, excellent point. I have opinions which may or may not be popular, but I think what I learned, because I've seen it firsthand, is that you can build culture remotely. It is not as deep and it is not as fulfilling. However, if you have hybrid and you have a remote culture, you can still make it work. But what I've seen over time is, yes, we pivoted and we did online bingo instead of, sitting together and having bingo, or we've done trivia, paint by numbers, theme events. We share photos. It's not the same as seeing everyone in their costumes for Weboween, which is our version of Halloween, Star Wars Day. The photos are great. And again, it does build culture, and that is way better than not doing those things. But it's not going to be the same as in-person interaction, because humans, you could just feel the energy is different when you're together. The middle point is if you have events online where cameras are required or at least normalized so people can see faces, that's better also because body language, right? Like, we are visual creatures. And so, you can have an event and have everybody on listening, but if you're not seeing each other, the quality of that interaction is subpar to being on video, which is subpar to being in person.
So that, I guess, raises an interesting question that I think probably a lot of us are wrestling with right now, which is as you've navigated this building connection kind of through the different evolutions, right? Where there was everybody was forced to be remote. And then we've kind of entered into this now hybrid where sometimes we're in the office and sometimes we're remote, and we have this different kind of, and that continues to evolve. What have you found through your work with connection are kind of the key ingredients? What have you learned about connection over the last several years that, sort of as you've arrived at how you're approaching it today and the things you're doing today, what are the things that you've learned that you think are really important? Can you call out like some key things that have bubbled up for you?
Yeah. So I don't know if this will directly answer your question, but one thing I've learned that I think I wish more people knew is who's on their culture cabinet or their culture committee. And I'm not talking about a formal one. I'm talking about the informal one. So what I learned quickly, especially once everyone was remote, because you have less control over, all of the messages and in-person things, is that there are 3 categories of people that you want to pay attention to from leadership or HR when you're looking at culture. And that is your influencers. So these are your go-to people that create buy-in and help push ideas forward. These people may or may not be managers or leaders. That part's not important. But who do you know that is going to help push things forward? There's the energizers, who are your cheerleaders, your pump up crew. They're always like excited. They're the first ones there. They help hang up whatever it is. And then there's the blockers, and we all know them. They're the naysayers that complicate the situation, and they ask those really challenging questions. And a lot of times we want to ignore that. We want to just kind of move on, be like, oh, that's just so-and-so. What I think is a huge miss is to do that. Instead, you need to include those people up front, because if you can get them on board, I mean, that would be dreamy. They might become an influencer, but even if you could just neutralize the chatter later, you are going to be in such a better position, because you're never going to have an event or an activity that everybody likes, and you shouldn't, right? People that opt in want to be there, and people that don't opt in, this is another thing I've seen, they still know you're doing it. And that part still matters, because I have never heard, oh, we don't do anything here, even from the people that never show up, because they're choosing to not show up, but they know you're doing it. And so A for effort on that.
Yeah. Well, and those 3 groups that's representative of a small percentage of employees, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's the majority of employees are either participators or not participators.
Right.
In a different range, but identifying those people and really engaging and leaning into them and getting them involved, that is something I think that gets overlooked. You said it as if it's a sort of standard practice that people do a culture committee or culture cabinet. And I do not think that is, at least that's not been my experience.
Okay.
So can you talk about what that looks like? How does yours work?
Oh, I'd love to. Yes. This is just, I love this because it doesn't fall to just HR. I think in a lot of organizations, the HR team becomes the party planners, they become the office coordinators. And maybe if you have someone that's really interested in that, but it doesn't work. You need some grassroots support, and you need it to be cross-departmental. But you can't volunteer people to do it. Okay. So for one, you have to set the expectations up front. We're going to meet twice a month for 30 minutes, and you might take on one activity a quarter. You kind of got to give people an idea of what they're signing up for. And then they get to come up with the ideas and ping their peers and find out what might be fun and pick the place that you're going to do a thing, even if it's online. I know one year, a great idea that came from a brand new member of our culture committee was to do an online magic show for our holiday party. This was during COVID and we weren't together. And I thought, okay. I mean, we can go with it. I don't know. And it was awesome. So you're going to keep the ideas fresh because you're going to have people from various departments. And then the other key piece is allowing them to rotate off, if it becomes too much or not fun. So maybe once a year, have a check-in, like, are you still in? Maybe get some new people, but just keep it moving because you don't want it to be obligatory or boring or like, oh, this is the month we always do the same things. Your attendance will drop off.
Got it. What sounds like a great, you'd have to have, I'm going to make just some assumptions here. Sounds like you probably have some pretty good leadership support for building culture in order to support people in doing this.
Yes.
It's fairly visible. People know what it is. And so they know why they might want to be involved. And because I'm thinking if I was listening to this, I'd be like, I wonder how many people they get involved. So how big is your culture committee at any given time?
I'd say it varies between 10 to 15 people.
Okay.
So
and
it's not huge.
From across a lot of different groups, I'm assuming.
Across all groups. And yes, important to have leadership because it does take a little bit of time, but you can even sweeten the deal. I mean, we definitely do have like a special lunch appreciation thing for them once a year because it is extra work that they're doing. So, you can show some love, but definitely you have to have leadership buy-in so they don't want to do something and they're not able to, which doesn't feel very good.
Got it. So I'm curious recently, what have you done recently when you think, in the sort of, and your workforce you're in hybrid, right? If I remember correctly,
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit at least about that. Cause I know that would be a question someone might have.
Yeah, so we are hybrid, about 3 days a week in the office. However, we still, because we've had an acquisition of a fully remote company, and then we actually last year acquired another fully remote company, it's hybrid, but we are mostly remote.
Okay. Good context. So tell me, what are a couple of things that have happened over, let's say, this year that the Culture Committee has put forward that you think is really effectively building or had an impact on connection across your workforce?
So the first one is we have peer-led kind of training and education sessions. Any size company can do this. So let's say there's someone in tech and you have a new tool or a new platform. They will lead sessions that teach the rest of us who don't maybe understand it quite as thoroughly how to work with it or troubleshoot questions. Or let's say you have someone in marketing who's really good at communication or writing. They could do a writing skills class for your sales enablement or just anybody, because we all write. So things like that. And maybe you do a survey to see what things people are interested in. And then you tap your internal experts because it makes them feel really good because they get to be the expert. And it's adding actual value to your company for free. I mean, you could always maybe do a gift card or a lunch or something for the person giving the training if you wanted, but most of the time I've found that they're just excited to share that information.
You said two things. That was the first one. What was the second one?
So the second one didn't exactly come directly from that culture committee, but it is something we have been doing that I love, and it is peer-to-peer mentorship. So we have partnered with Imperative, which is a great user-friendly platform that it's just all set up. They do all the back-end work for you. But you could do this yourself and come up with a list of questions and guide the conversations. But allowing peers to meet and to ask each other thought-provoking, more personal development and work development style questions has done wonders for that inter-team and inter-department functionality. The drama is down, the conflict is down. And what I found has been one of the most beneficial things is that now you have this connection between this department over here, which sometimes runs into issues with this department. And these two people know each other. They've had real conversations and they will just proactively go talk to each other to help figure it out versus, we have to go work with this group and they're going to give us pushback and whatever. So the peer-to-peer mentorship has been a real game changer.
Can you give us a breakdown of what a peer-to-peer like session looks like? Like give us an example of one and kind of how that works. Because I think it's such a cool, powerful concept that at the surface sounds good, but it's like, okay, what does that actually look like? So tell us what it looks like.
Yeah. So at least the way we use it is you set a meeting time. Well, first of all, you get matched and you take a little assessment to make sure we're matching managers with managers, individual contributors. And we decide if we're doing within teams or between teams. We try and mix it up. And so once you're matched with your partner, then you have your session, you log in, and there are, I think, 3 questions that you will ask each other. But before you do that, you do a one-word check-in. Am I feeling tired, stressed, anxious, excited, whatever? And then you have the conversation with your peer, like what's working well for you this week? What is a goal that you want to go for, but you're afraid to, and why? And you really talk to that person as much as you're comfortable with. And you can make follow-up notes that just stay with you to follow up with them next week to ask if they did whatever they said they wanted to do. So it's a little bit of accountability and just kind of a safe place to talk about something you want to do, but you're nervous with someone who understands the internal dynamics of work. Because work friends are a different breed of friend who understand differently, right, than just your outside of work friends. And then at the end, you do a one-word checkout question, like, how do you feel now after your conversation? And what we have seen is the trend, well, 2 things. One, the trend of before words to afterwards, always positive line. Every single time people feel better, even if they were like, I'm overwhelmed, I don't have time for this, they always feel better after. And then even more interesting, over time, because we've been doing this for maybe a year and a half now, the before words have gotten more positive, which is just a really cool trend to see. You're like, oh, you're coming into meetings less stressed than you were a year ago. That is good to know.
That's great to know. And I wonder if, there's probably a lot of things driving that. Part of it might be too, that just generally understanding what these meetings are about too, like just a positive, expectation heading into it perhaps is impacting it too. That's great. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I know that peer-to-peer mentoring can be used in a lot of different ways. Some people have very different, from one meeting to the next is a different kind of conversation and all those sorts of things. But that's a great example. And I appreciate you sharing that. And like you said, it's something that there are great tools to help you with it, like Imperative that you're using, but it's a simple thing that you could implement on your own. So thank you for that. So I would love to shift gears a little bit to ask you right now, what's a challenge that you're currently wrestling with in your role?
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard this before, but it's AI. AI is coming. I want to stay on top of it and use it to free up the admin work that none of us, want to do. And what I think really is just stuck in my brain is that when we think of Gen Z and certainly Gen Alpha, they are going to grow up with AI just like some of us, maybe we were older, but certainly the younger people in the workforce grew up with the internet. Right. It is a parallel. So we can't wait to figure it out. And it's changing so rapidly that I really want to keep up with it. And yet it is kind of overwhelming because it's brand new.
So how are you tackling that? I'm curious, like what's been your approach to stepping into the AI exploration?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have listened to webinars and tried to hear from people who know more about it than I do. And also, I've just been playing with it. And what I've found that's been really fun is to have it to help write an email. Let's say a benefits open enrollment coming up. You can take your email from last year, put it in there and say, rewrite this in a better way for this upcoming, and then tweak it or ask it, what are the tools that I could be doing to develop my managers for this specific topic? And so I've just been trying to play with it And we should asterisk, like, don't just take it copy paste. Like, you still have to edit, you still have to do your end of the work, but you've got to get in there and play with it.
Yeah. And there's so many that it's so impressive. It's easy to get overwhelmed by what it does on the surface, but you
Mhm.
also need to remember that there's all kind like you said, I use it oftentimes to do research, to supplement research. But
Yeah.
some of the tools I find I use it to do research, I'll ask it to return the source. And
Oh,
even when it sends the source back, the link is broken. It doesn't go
oh,
anywhere. And then
yeah.
I can't find that I can't find that data anywhere. So I'm like, you have to be very thoughtful about what you're
Yeah.
doing and check your work. So that is great advice. Like, yes, play with it, but also, double back and dig in and see what's working and what's not. So
Yeah.
I
I
think
think
that's
the other thing that is not to be forgotten is, depending on what kind of work you're doing, there is a fear that AI will replace some people's jobs or parts of the jobs. And so you don't need to ignore that either. I would say get in front of it, talk about it, and instead of letting those people just linger in no information, maybe ask, have you played with AI? Is there a way we could use it to free you up for some of the things you don't want to do these other things you're more interested in? So I'd say don't ignore it and hope nobody notices AI and that maybe it will take some of their pieces of their job, but instead address it up front and reframe it to have them involved. So it's not just
yes.
fear based.
That is great advice. The way I frame that up always is I just remind people that uncertainty kills engagement. That's
Mm,
uncertainty is the sort of the enemy we're fighting every day. And so if you can create some clarity for them as to what's happening or what might happen, that's always better than no information. So great advice. So I'd love to invite you to think for a moment too, as we transition and get ready to close here, to think kind of aspirationally about the future. I'm going to ask you to think out 5 years into the future.
mm.
And I want you to think about what do you hope in 5 years is different about work than it is today?
That's a good question. I'll be very idealistic because we have plenty of time to get there.
Yes.
And for me, I think there's more cohesion and understanding that as people in the workforce, we are way more alike than we are different. Again, work is a great equalizer because you've got people you spend all day with that you would never cross paths with outside of work, intergenerationally, just culturally. And you're all there to do a job together. And if we can empower ourselves, we will empower those around us. And when we take care of ourselves, it only makes other people better. It's just a self reinforcing positive feedback loop. So if we can have civility and realize that we are way more alike than different and act accordingly, that would be my greatest hope for the next 5 years.
Mm. Boy, and if that happens at work, that will change the world. Like that
Exactly.
is a powerful aspiration. So thank you for that. I share that. I will get behind that 100%. We'll do our work. So, well, as we close, it's funny. What I'm about to ask you is going to sound like I'm sort of stealing this directly from you, but I promised that I had this written down before we started. So the way that I was going to have us check out today is, in one word, how are you feeling as we wrap up our conversation today?
Oh, you're maybe a little psychic. I'm feeling optimistic. I think there's so much good going on in the world, and it's easy to get sucked down into the details of all the not so good parts, which, don't get me wrong, there are plenty. But I really think people are good, and I think we all want to do the right thing. So I'm feeling optimistic.
Mm. And for me, it's hopeful. It's
Mhm.
anytime I get an opportunity to have conversations with leaders like you that lead with so much heart and are doing so much interesting, powerful work to connect people together, it gives me great hope that we can do it, right? That 5-year vision you describe, we can do that it is possible. So it gives me enormous hope. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So if people want to connect with you, they're inspired by your work, they want to connect, follow your work, learn more about you, where are the best places to do that?
Yeah, I would love that. So I'm on LinkedIn, Andrea Herron, easy to find. Also, my website is sidesconsultingservices.com, SIDES, consultingservices.com. Got
Awesome.
plenty of info over there and free resources. And I just want to change the world. No big deal.
There's plenty of work. We need all hands on deck. We'll do it together. I will include a link to your LinkedIn profile, your website, and your website also has information on where you can buy the book, which I recommend HR leaders in particular go grab that. That's the tools we need right now to help people as we're transforming our organization. Andrea, thank you so much for being here. This was awesome and fun. I appreciate you.
It was great. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening. I am always grateful that you share a bit of your time with us. I hope that you are as inspired by Andrea as I am. And please remember to check in with those who matter most to you. It may be the most important thing you can do today. Till next time.